Armenia's Prime Minister calls on his supporters to gather in the capital Yerevan after firing the head of the armed forces over an attempted coup. A U.S. intelligence report is set to show that Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman approved the killing of journalist Jamal Khashoggi. Riyadh has admitted rogue operatives were involved but denied any knowledge by MBS. And protesters continue to take to the streets across Myanmar, keeping up the pressure on the junta. Facebook, meanwhile, bans all accounts linked to the military for their use of deadly force. It's good to have you with us here on France 24. First, a U.S. intelligence report will be released later today. It's expected to show that Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman approved the killing of journalist Jamal Khashoggi at the Saudi consulate in Istanbul back in 2018. The U.S. president has seen the report and is expected to speak to Saudi's King Salman. Riyadh has admitted that Khashoggi was killed by rogue operatives but denied any involvement by MBS. Joamil Jamin reports.
Old information, but with a new interpretation and a change in course for US-Saudi relations.
Have you read the Jamal Khashoggi report yet from the ODNI?
Yes, I have.
On Wednesday, President Joe Biden confirmed that he had read a soon-to-be declassified US intelligence briefing concerning the 2018 murder of Saudi journalist Jamal Khashoggi. Khashoggi was lured to the Saudi consulate in Istanbul on October 2, 2018, and killed by a team of operatives linked to Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. From there, they are alleged to have dismembered his body, but his remains have never been found. The original report, for which the CIA was the main contributor, determined with high confidence that the Crown Prince had personally ordered the killing himself. However, under the Trump administration, no evidence was ever presented nor spoken about publicly.
Maybe he did, maybe he didn't. They did not make that assessment. The CIA has looked at it, they've studied it a lot, they have nothing definitive.
The White House said last week that a recalibration of American-Saudi relations was already in motion, with President Biden communicating directly to King Salman, unlike Trump before him, who had aligned himself to the prince.
The president is taking a fresh approach to how he engages with foreign leaders around the world and different from the prior administration. And that means he will not hold back. And he will speak out when there are concerns he has about human rights abuses. At the same time, we have a long relationship with Saudi Arabia. They are being attacked in the region, and that is certainly an area where we continue to work with them on.
Recent developments, however, already point to a shifting dynamic in diplomacy. Earlier this month, Biden announced an end to all U.S. support for Saudi Arabia's offensive operations in Yemen, coming after over 6 years of intelligence and weapon sharing, as well as logistical support.
Protesters in Myanmar have taken to the streets across various cities today. Demonstrators once again keeping up the pressure on the military junta nearly 1 month after the coup. Today, students and doctors are holding fresh protests. Tech giant Facebook, meanwhile, says it's banning all accounts linked to the junta. The company citing the deadly use of force against anti-coup demonstrators. For more on the story, here's Philip Sherwood reporting from Bangkok.
Facebook has announced today that all military-related sites and pages and posts will be removed from their platform. Now, Facebook is synonymous with the internet in Myanmar. Many people only use Facebook to access the internet. Facebook had already taken some steps to remove the main military propaganda page last week, but they've now announced much more wide-ranging restrictions. And this is the military. Funnily enough, they had already officially banned Facebook from being provided by internet telecom companies in Myanmar, but people were getting around this by proxy servers. And so, it still is the place online where a lot of people go to for information. They said the risks are too high. They say events since February the 1st, the crackdowns, the coup itself, the violence mean that the risks are too high to have military-related pages, including commercial entities tied up with the military, and there are many of those on their platform. Now, this is a major vote of no confidence by the internet, by the social media giant in the Myanmar government. And it's also quite a change of policy for Facebook themselves, who have tried around the world to sort Mark Zuckerberg has always emphasized issues of freedom of speech over removing elements on their site. But there's been long-running complaints in Myanmar that hate groups, that whipped up fermented hatred against the Rohingya Muslims had an audience via Facebook. So it's very interesting to see the social media giant take that position, and again a message to Myanmar's military that their legitimacy is not being recognized not just by people on the street but by an organization like Facebook.
Philip Sherwell reporting there earlier from Bangkok. Now, despite the junta in Myanmar trying to restrict internet access, images from the protests continue to circulate online. Citizen journalists have been sharing pictures and live streaming from their smartphones. Cole Stangler reports.
They're a familiar sight at protests in Myanmar. Often armed with little more than cell phones, citizen journalists and live streamers are making sure the story gets out, stepping up as traditional media faces pressure from the military junta. Tharlong Zangtet has been at it since the coup began. Oftentimes, the coverage isn't only about getting out the news. Broadly sympathetic to protests, live streamers can provide practical information to protesters, like the position of soldiers and police forces, and how to avoid them. All of it makes these journalists an invaluable source to the movement, according to this NGO in Thailand.
They are at the front. I mean, without them, we don't get the news. They are the first one on the streets. They are the first one arriving at the protest avenues. So they are the first ones that we would get the information from. For us, they are critical. They are at the front, and that's why we need to show them our solidarity.
Since seizing power, the military has repeatedly imposed internet blackouts, while fears grow of an uptick in online surveillance. But that hasn't stopped the protests from rolling on.
The head of the armed forces in Armenia has been fired. The country's prime minister is accusing the military of attempting a coup after it called for his resignation. Nikol Pashinyan has asked his supporters to gather in the center of Yerevan today. Since last year, the prime minister has come under mounting criticism over his handling of a bloody 6-week conflict between Azerbaijan and Armenia over the region of Nagorno-Karabakh. For more on this story, we can bring in our chief foreign editor, Rob Parsons. Rob, what is happening in Yerevan today exactly?
Well, I mean, this has been boiling for some time, Delano. Following the defeat of Armenia by Azerbaijan in the fighting over Nagorno-Karabakh, the people of Armenia absolutely stunned because they never expected that they could lose against Azerbaijan. And many people have been calling for the resignation of Nikol Pashinyan ever since. A recent opinion poll suggested almost 50% of the population wants him to step down. But this latest development follows weeks, first of all, of demonstrations by the opposition, a coalition of 16 parties, calling again for him to step down and for Vazgen Manoukian to take over as interim prime minister. But more specifically, following the decision by Pashinyan to sack the first deputy chief of staff of the armed forces, a man called Mr. Hachatarian, just a few days ago. That was apparently caused by the general criticizing Pashinyan for what he called a ridiculous claim that only 10% of the Iskander missiles that Armenia had worked in the war against Azerbaijan. In response to that dismissal, the army has responded in the way we've seen today, with a claim by the armed forces spokesperson that Nikol Pashinyan was no longer able to lead the government, that it was no longer competent. He was no longer competent to lead the government. It wasn't absolutely clear that this is a coup d'état, more perhaps just a suggestion he should step down. But certainly the prime minister has interpreted it as a coup d'état. He's dismissed the head of the armed forces now, calling for his own supporters to come to central Yerevan, the Armenian capital, to demonstrate. And he said that he's going to make a speech himself on Armenian television to the people.
We spoke to a guest earlier who said there was no physical movement of the military on the streets of Yerevan.
Yeah.
I want to talk to you about the reaction coming out of Russia, because the Kremlin says it's concerned, but it is saying this is a domestic issue.
Yeah, I mean, obviously the Kremlin will be concerned, but the Kremlin has no great liking, it has to be said, for Nikol Pashinyan. And if he is ousted by the military, which has strong ties with Moscow, I don't think that President Putin would be overly disappointed. As I said, he has no great liking for Nikol Pashinyan, who has been critical of him in the past, and would be much happier if the military or civilian politicians approved by the military were to be installed in office.
Rob, thank you very much for that. Rob Parsons there. Next, Beijing has hit out at mounting international criticism over its treatment of Uyghurs in the province of Xinjiang. China's ambassador to the United Nations in Geneva accusing the West of interfering in its internal affairs. This after a host of countries, including France, denounced the institutionalized repression of the Uyghur minority. Regulators in the United States say Johnson & Johnson's single-dose vaccine offers strong protection against severe forms of COVID-19. The announcement sets the stage for final approval by the FDA within days. Johnson & Johnson's shot could offer a third vaccine option in the United States. It would also speed up inoculations by requiring one dose instead of two. Tiger Woods is recovering in hospital after leg surgery following Tuesday's car crash. Investigators are hoping the vehicle's data recorder will uncover what caused the accident. Woods will not be facing reckless driving charges as there were no other cars involved, and he was on the road notorious for fatal crashes.
This is the hospital where Tiger Woods underwent emergency surgery on his right leg. A statement on the golfer's Twitter account said he was awake, responsive and recovering. Authorities said the 45-year-old is lucky to be alive and that he did not appear to be under the influence.
The deputy on scene assessed the condition of Tiger Woods and there was no evidence of any impairment whatsoever. He was lucid, no odor of alcohol.
Woods was driving alone when his SUV struck a sign, crossed over two oncoming lanes and flipped several times before coming to rest on its side. Doctors say Woods faces a long and difficult recovery after shattering his tibia and fibula bones in multiple locations. The accident stunned the world of golf, with fellow players praising everything he had done for the sport.
He means a lot to the players, it means a lot to the tour. He's the one that brings the fans. It's the whole reason probably 90% of us are out here playing.
I feel like we should pay tribute to him every day for being on the PGA Tour and what he's done for golf.
Woods has won 15 major championships and a record-tying 82 PGA Tour victories. But the accident has put his playing career in doubt. He has, though, shown resilience before, achieving one of the greatest comebacks in golfing history. After winning the 2019 Masters, after going through 4 back surgeries and an arrest for a DUI charge.
Selena Sykes there with that report. Now, after spending over a century behind closed doors, a painting by Vincent van Gogh of a street here in Paris has gone on display for the very first time. A street scene in Montmartre was painted back in 1887 and has been owned by one family in France. The work is set to go under the hammer at Sotheby's next month, where it's expected to fetch €8 million.
Nor a neo-impressionist touch with the little points of paint. You see that he introduces bright colors using very pure pigments. One of the reasons the colors are so well preserved in this work is the quality of the pigments that Van Gogh used, that I think his brother Theo bought for him. There's a beautiful story between Vincent and Theo, so this painting also is very moving and as a testimony to their relationship when they lived together. There's so many things you can see in it.
That's it from me. Thank you very much for watching.
Insects have long been touted as a solution to cut the ecological impact in food production, but today they are closer than ever to flooding our supermarket shelves. The humble yellow mealworm has European safety approval, paving the way for insect-based delicacies on a large scale.
Down to Earth, presented by Mairead Dundas on France 24 and France24.com.